Whew. So I've noticed something about myself. Whenever I travel, I always bring two handhelds with me. A Nintendo one and a Sony one. The Nintendo side, I mean, it's pretty simple. Whatever mood I'm in, it's gonna be the Switch or 3DS, whatever game I'm playing at the time. That's how I decide. The Sony side, it's a lot more difficult due to the fact that, well, the PSP and the Vita are very similar. Now, people will always say, "Oh, this one's better," this was nostalgia. Like, screw all that. I've owned both of them when they came out, essentially. But screw nostalgia, screw any of that shit. No favoritism here. I just want to pit these two consoles against each other and find out which is the superior one. So with that being said, the criteria are innovation, control, software, performance and specs, and lasting appeal. So yeah, the PSP and the Vita. Before I start, I gotta mention, these are both phenomenal systems, but they do have their caveats and, some issues. But even with all that being said and done, they're still phenomenal systems and they're here to stay. So, let's get to it. Which out of these two is the best handheld? First up, innovation. Alright, to start things off, let's talk about the PSP. Sony's first official portable console, if you don't count the Pocket Station, which you should. I will accept the PS1 LCD, but that's just me. No, instead let me take you back to 2004, where MP3 players were just becoming part of the norm. Apple was just gaining a huge foothold in the market with the iPod, and smartphones were still a bit of a pipe dream. Times were changing, and Sony definitely took notice of this, and jumped on the trend. At the time, the PS2 was reigning supreme as the newly appointed best-selling console of all time. And while they were on top of the world, Sony announced their next big console. No, not the PS3, the PlayStation Portable. A full-blown multimedia device that fit in your pocket. It had the ability to connect to the internet via Wi-Fi, which was a huge deal in the mid-2000s, especially for a handheld. You could surf the web and eventually download PS1 games to play on the go. It was able to store media such as pictures, MP3s, and videos. It had its own new physical media, which in retrospect looks a bit silly, but it could hold up to 1.8 gigabytes of data, which allowed for impressive games to be played on the go, as well as watch full-fledged movies. A huge deal since DVDs were still king, and streaming media wasn't even a commonplace thing yet. Nowadays, everything that is found on this thing can easily be found in your pocket with your smartphone, in a much smaller form factor too. But in 2004, this was a big deal, and definitely kicked open a few doors. It was prophetic at what the technical landscape would look like today. Sure, other companies doing the same thing with PDAs and small personal computers, but nothing hit the success the PSP did at launch. It was a hit and truly a pioneer in the field. But now, let's move on to the PlayStation Vita. And what did this do to top its predecessor? Well, everything. And at the same time, absolutely nothing. By the time the Vita came out in 2011, it was by far the most impressive handheld video game system to ever release, and even to this day, it's still mighty impressive. But it did nothing else but beef up the technical specs, add two touch interfaces and two cameras to what is essentially a beefed up PSP. It also thankfully switched from UMDs to the new Vita game cards, which held a lot more space. But gone was the ability to buy physical movies for this system. Now, personally, I don't really care about UMD movies, but as a fan of obsolete media, like Laserdisc, I'm willing to bet there's a bunch of people that are going to be collecting these in the future, or are probably already doing it right now. So, if this is your bag, do it, because these aren't being made anymore. Now besides that, let's go back to the Vita. Now it does sound like I'm being a little negative here, which by no means I'm not trying to be, but by 2011, smartphones were not the norm. Everything that made the Vita a technical marvel was already being outshined or was better on a smartphone. Once again, yes, it was the most advanced dedicated handheld game system to release in 2011. But outside of video games, your phone was already beating it in every other aspect as an entertainment device. And not to mention, this was also the beginning of the era of tablets. So the smaller screen of the Vita was less enticing to most people, especially non-gamers. So yes, while the Vita is a fine system and I absolutely love it, I mean, for the time, this thing was seriously an omen of things to come. This was innovative as all hell, and seriously, any entertainment device, whether it be your phone or some kind of tablet, owes a lot to this thing. While it may not be the first to ever do all that stuff, it was definitely one of the first things to bring it all together and bring it to the mainstream. So yeah, for innovation, the point easily goes to the PSP. Next up, controls. Now let's actually flip these systems over and see what they feel like. From the get-go, the PSP feels great. I have the PSP 2000 right here, which is the second model. Now I did originally own the original, the 1000, way back at launch, but, well, they're pretty much similar. Yes, the 1000 is a bit bulkier and a tad bit heavier, but either way you slice it, the PSP feels great. The face buttons feel nice and responsive, the D-pad is just like the D-pad from a DualShock, so no complaints there. And the L and R are satisfying as hell to click in, and the menu and option buttons are serviceable. They are pretty flush with the system, making them a tiny bit difficult to press in, but during hectic gameplay moments, that's exactly what you want. You don't want these buttons easily be pushable in the heat of gaming. All in all, the PSP has a solid control scheme, and one of the best in the handheld market. Now, let's move on to the Vita. At a distance, it looks like not much has changed here, but once you get into it, it definitely feels different. The face buttons and D-pad are far smaller than before, and a bit stiffer. But this feels great. There's less travel between the button presses, and the buttons feel more clicky. Well, except for the L and R buttons. They're a bit more spongy, especially compared to the PSP's, but they still feel satisfying as hell to click. Oh, and the menu and option buttons are far more sunken in this time. But once again, once pressed, they give a satisfying click. Everything about this seems like it shouldn't be all too impressive, but it functions remarkably well. Oh, and since this is a product of the early 2000s, it of course supports a touchscreen, making navigating menus a pinch. It also includes a back touch interface, which honestly was a gimmick at the time. Yes, some games like Tearaway use it beautifully, but outside of that, little to no games ever supported it outside of a few little pieces of flair here and there. Is that pretty much it? Well, let's not forget the gyroscope in the Vita itself. Very much like the touch interface, not every game supported it, but for the ones that did, at least here, honestly made them a lot better. Especially games like Gravity Rush, which is a shining example of it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, both consoles are honestly great feeling in the hands, and to be honest, they both feel very similar. It's kind of hard to choose between them. I mean, oh, I almost forgot. The thumbsticks. Now, for PlayStation, this was a huge thing because they were the first to put full-fledged analog thumbstick on a portable console. And yeah, I'm an idiot. I almost forgot the most important aspects of these, at least going off the early promotion of each console respectively. Now, yes, the Vita has two thumbsticks, a thing people made a big deal over the PSP not having, but every PSP game was designed with one thumbstick in mind. And from what I remember, it didn't suffer that badly from it. So let's not even put that in the equation. Let's just compare the sticks for what they are. Because honestly, it's not about how many sticks you have, it's how you use them. And well, Vita wins. What is this? This is not a thumbstick, this is a circle disc, and not even a good one like on the 3DS. I mean, back in 2005, I guess this was okay, but nowadays, this just feels terrible. Am I exaggerating? Maybe a bit, but when compared to the comically undersized thumbsticks on the Vita, the circle disc is horrible. The Vita control sticks are at the very least comfortable in the hands and feel honestly nice once you get, well, used to them. Yeah, they're tiny nubs when compared to the big boy controllers, but this is leagues better than the PSP thumbstick. That on top of the touchscreen and the gyro support makes the Vita the clear winner here. Sure, the smaller buttons seem weird, and if you have massive hands, you're going to have a bad time. But as a whole, I prefer to hold the Vita for long periods of time. Winner is the Vita. Now let's talk about the exclusive software for each console. And yeah, each have great user interfaces, simple and to the point, and very reminiscent of their eras. PSP is laid out almost like a TV menu, simplistic and everything is easy to find. Note, this was such a great UI that the PS3 followed suit and adopted it verbatim. Another note is that this UI did not begin with the PSP, but was actually first featured on the PSX, a digital video recorder with a PS2 built in. So I guess in Sony's case, don't fix what ain't broken. Well, in the case of the Vita, they didn't fix it, and it's not broken, but Sony definitely went for a much more smartphone approach to the UI, with everything represented like app bubbles, pretty much to go with the touchscreen interface. It was easy to navigate, and by that point, thanks to smartphones, very familiar. And in this case, you can't really compare the two because whichever one is going to be better in your eyes is essentially down to preference. So now let's move on to the apps themselves. And let's just say outside of browsing the mobile internet and some multimedia, it was pretty bare bones. Yes, the Vita had access to stuff like Netflix, but the less we say about that the better because it was slow and it sucked. Both could play movie files and music files, but during both eras you were more than likely to reach for another device to enjoy these bits of media. I mean yeah, the PSP, as mentioned before, was a pioneer. But even at the time, even though it was a multimedia and jack of all trades, there was still better places to enjoy these things. No, instead where the PSP and the Vita really shined, and to be honest the main reason anyone even bought these devices over another contemporary multimedia device, was the games. And well, both have amazing libraries, with both quality and quantity. First up, let's look at the PSP. Some of the standout titles include 2 God of War games, a slew of RPGs, and some great sequels to Sony heavy hitters such as Killzone and Hot Shots Golf. Now, those are some damn good games. Next up, let's look at the Vita. Some standout titles include 2 God of War games, a slew of RPGs, and some great sequels to Sony heavy hitters such as Killzone and Hot Shots Golf. The hell? Did I just have a stroke? That was the exact same... I just said the exact same thing. Despite what a lot of people have said on the internet that the PSP easily demolishes the Vita in this category, if you actually delve deep into the Vita catalog, you'll quickly find out that that just isn't true. If anything, the quality and the vast amount of hidden gems along with the AAA releases, as mentioned before, they're pretty much comparable. So how do I decide between the two? I mean, it is pretty much preference at this point. But, well, I'll settle it with just one more question. Which has the more worthwhile original games? And, well, I honestly feel like the PSP wins here. Yes, Vita has far more technically impressive games, but these games are mostly downgraded ports of better games on home consoles, as well as tons of visual novels. I mean, not saying it's a bad thing, it's just not my thing. But if it is your thing, Jesus Christ, get a Vita, because holy shit, there are so many visual novels, it's not even funny, and apparently some of the best ever made are on there. This is all just conjecture from what I've read. But yeah, if that's your thing, get a Vita. Holy shit. But yeah, regardless of that, the fact of the matter is, the PSP has far more original games, spanning many more different genres. For every 5 great ports the Vita has, the PSP has 5 original games or sequels with completely unique experiences to other titles in their respective franchises. Neither is a bad lineup, and don't let anyone tell you any different. I mean, the Vita has amazing games like Uncharted Golden Abyss, Gravity Rush, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and of course the best game on the Vita, Persona 4 Golden. All of these games are system sellers by themselves. But once again, when you compare it to the likes of God of War Ghost of Sparta, Daxter, Final Fantasy Tactics The War of the Lions, Crisis Core, Patapon, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Jean d'Arc, and both Grand Theft Auto Stories games. Yeah, on sheer original games, the PSP wins here. And just another point that I have to obviously throw in there, is that the Vita never really cracked the 1300, games released freaking line. Whereas the PSP had about 1900 plus. And yes, while with the Vita you can play some old PSP games on the digital store, obviously that's a thing, but we're just focusing on the consoles themselves, and technically, at the end of the day, you're still playing PSP games on a Vita. So those are PSP games, and it's still part of the software library that made the PSP so damn big and important. I mean, for quality, quantity, and variety, the PSP wins here pretty much by a landslide. Moving on to the hardware side of things, the performance and specs. Now this is going to be a weird one, on the PSP side of things especially, because there are like 4 revisions of it, making it a total of 5 different PSPs ever to release. But now, to keep it simple, I will focus on the PSP that I currently have, the 2000, while touching on the others. For starters, every PSP sports a MIPS R4000 CPU chip that runs at 1 to 333 MHz. Every PSP has 64 MB of RAM, except for the original 1000 model which only had 32 MB. And they all run a Media Engine GPU that tops out at 166 MHz. Every version has Wi-Fi except for the final Street version, and the PSP Go is the only one that is all digital only, as well as having a smaller screen. Every other PSP sports a 4.3-inch LCD with a resolution of 480 by 272, with actual varying screen quality from one to another. I'm not going to go deep into all of them, but I do have to mention the fact that there is much debate of which PSP screen is the best. The top 2 contenders is the 2000 and the 3000 model. Both are exceptional screens, but the 3000 screen has more vivid colors, better contrast, and handles glare far better. The only downside is that the 3000 screen has an issue with interlacing, which produces a combing effect. While to some, the benefits here clearly outweigh the negative, but to others, this one negative is a deal breaker. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of getting one of these in the future. Oh, and the 3000 has a built-in mic, but that is ultimately useless now since the software that used it is no longer usable on the PSP. Not really important, I just needed to mention it before that one person in the comments, you know who you are, just jumps down my throat, whatever. But yeah, besides that, each PSP has all your standard ports, a memory card slot, headphone jack, and starting with the PSP 2000, it even has an AV out allowing players to play games on a TV through composite and component with proprietary cables. A pretty beefy and versatile system for its time, but definitely shows its age today. Now, moving on to the Vita, of course, this is going to have better specs. But humor me, because there's some interesting ththings to point out here. The Vita has 2 versions, but specs-wise, they are identical except for one thing, and we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about the similarities. Both have a custom quad-core ARM Cortex A9 MP Core CPU chip, and a quad-core SGX 543 MP4 plus GPU, along with 512 megabytes of system RAM, and 128 megabytes of VRAM, with clock speeds of 200 MHz on the GPU side and a max of 444 MHz on the CPU side. Now let's get to the crowning aspect of the Vita, or at least in the original 1000 model. The OLED screen. Yes, the screen is bigger than the PSP's, a hefty 5 inches, and the resolution is 960 by 544, pretty much half of 1080p. But that's not what makes the Vita original screen incredible. No, it's the fact that it's an OLED screen. The colors on this were utter perfection. Everything looks vibrant and on point, and of course the black levels. On a normal LCD, when a scene shows a black area or if you're simply at a black loading screen, you can see that it's not truly black, but a very dark gray. This is due to the screen backlight. Well, on an OLED screen, this is gone, and a black scene looks as black as it does in real life, making colors pop and dark areas look truly dark. I mean, it's obvious, the Vita wins as a whole on raw power and tech, but even if I decide to discount every other aspect, the Vita wins on the screen alone. Now, as I mentioned before, there was a difference between the Vita models, and yeah, sadly the newer 2000 Vita downgraded to an LCD. I will point out that the new Vita thankfully upgraded to a normal charging port that sports a USB micro port, which is far more convenient than the original stupid proprietary port, but yeah, the OLED version is still the superior Vita for screen alone. And if we're going to split hairs here and take everything into account, the Vita 2000 screen is still leagues better than any of the best screens on the PSP systems. Not through lack of trying, mind you, it's just how technology works. As time passes, things get more advanced, hardware-wise. So, no matter which version of each console you look at, it's pretty clear that the Vita takes the W here. And now finally, we move on to the final criteria, and the most important thing of any legacy console. Its lasting appeal. Or in this case, are they still worth owning and collecting for today? First, let's talk about their official physical releases. With PSP, UMDs are seen as a whole new format, and there exist tons of them out in the wild in a multitude of ways. Whether it be games, full movies, or TV shows, PSP was setting itself up as something that could rival DVDs. Of course, this didn't happen for 2 big reasons. First, let's talk about the UMDs themselves. They were mini discs housed in a plastic shell. This made them look sleek, unique, and in a way protect the disc from getting scratched easily, at least compared to normal CDs. I actually love this design. It was a halfway point between discs and carts, very much like a hard shell floppy disk. Kids, if you don't know what that is, ask your parents. And then say, wow, that must have sucked. It kinda did. But as cool as UMDs were, they contained a big problem. The outer plastic housing was flimsy as hell. This was more than likely a production cost-saving measure, but they were not durable. Whether it be due to wear over time, or just taking the UMD out of the weird game case design which feels like it's trying to pry the disc yet open, a constant issue with these was the plastic breaking and the disc becoming loose. Thankfully you can buy off-brand replacements easily today, but this is just a bandage to an original design flaw. Secondly, around the PSP's time, physical media was being overtaken by the digital age. Since the 80s and 90s, people were amazed that media kept getting smaller and smaller. UMD takes the crown as the smallest video game disc around. But by this point, people didn't care. Digital games and SD cards were now all the rage, and something as small as a UMD was now considered bulky and somewhat dated by comparison. Now comparing that to the Vita's physical games, and it's like night and day. Gone was a spinning disc replaced by a sleek mini card-like cartridge. The Vita game card is a product at the beginning of the Neo solid-state era. Containing tons of memory in such a small package was great. Not much else to say really for the Vita game cards, but out of the two, it is the superior format, for its size and durability. Despite the fact that Sony kept the vice grip game cases for Vita as well. What the hell's with Sony and their portable games? I mean, even their freaking game cases want to keep games away from players. Oh, that was a topical joke! Which is a perfect segue to... No, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. With that out of the way, now let's move on to the digital side of things, and this is just all bad from here. I have nothing bad to say about the performance of each console. Both handle digital games like champs, and in many ways is the preferred way to play games on a portable console. But instead, let's focus on what makes digital games possible. And here we have 2 glaring issues that each share. First up, proprietary memory cards. Doesn't matter which console you bought at launch, both had the audacity to support proprietary memory cards, and they were damn pricey. Now, thankfully at this point in time, PSP memory cards are dirt cheap, and adapters exist making them easily accessible. So for digital storage, the PSP has a leg up on the Vita, because these little pieces of shit are still very expensive. Sony designed these so well that nobody, and I mean nobody, has been able to reverse engineer knockoffs, making official Vita memory cards ridiculously hard to find at a low price. So if you were to think that an all-digital library was the way to go and cheaper, nope. This literally forced people to just walk away from the Vita. This was ridiculous. This is bullshit. The prices were ridiculous. I don't know why the hell Sony keeps thinking that proprietary is good anywhere. You want your freaking console to be sold. Stop trying to nickel and dime with this bullshit like this. Nickel and dime with more games. This was ridiculous. And even the 1 gigabyte included on the 2000 model wasn't enough. 1 gigabyte? Are you shitting me? This is what tanked it. This was the harbinger of death. This was the freaking final nail in the goddamn coffin. This fucking killed the Vita. This stupid little card. God damn it. This business practice ruined the Vita experience, and for the foreseeable future, it's bound to become an even bigger issue. Because, speaking of which, enough is enough. I mean, I can't really dance around this freaking topic anymore. It's a freaking elephant in the room, and I've already talked about that before in another video. If you like digital games, you're shit out of luck. On the digital side, the future of both of these consoles is pretty grim. At the time of this video, the PSP PSN store is dead. It died on July 2nd, 2021. Now, I'm not saying that it's empty or anything. No, I mean it's gone. You can thankfully still download your old games, but as far as new purchases go, you ain't making any, because you can't. Now, while the PS Vita was just saved the last second from the same chopping block, Sony just announced its final game to ever be listed on the store was July 20th, 2021. That is them already getting the guillotine ready. The Vita is still breathing, and despite the PSP dying, you can still buy a multitude of PSP games on the Vita store itself. But its fate is still sealed. It's living on borrowed time at this point. Sony has shown to everyone that they can pull the plug at any moment. So, in conclusion, for lasting appeal, this one's still alive, but I'm pretty sure not for much longer, and to be honest, my Vita's gonna be dated very quickly, because I know Sony's gonna pull this shit out of nowhere at the end of the year, and it's just screw it. They both lose this point. For lasting appeal, they both lose. Inevitably making this a tie. Well, that's the video. And yeah. That sucked. God damn it, Sony. I've already talked about this. I don't want to talk about it again. I'm done. Just sorry. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And God damn it. Hey, you still there? Yeah, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there are other ways to enjoy your systems past the expiration date. Game preservation is a huge deal for me, and if Sony doesn't want to keep these handhelds alive, well, there's only one place you can really turn to: hacking your system. And in this regard, you can't go wrong with either one. Whether your poison is playing backups of your PSP and Vita library, or even playing some good old-fashioned retro games through emulation, both systems are dynamos at running games smoothly, especially if you overclock them, which you can do with each system. Compound on a slew of homebrew games and software from the gaming community, and you have tons of content at your fingertips. And in regard to the Vita, there's even a solution for its horrible memory card issue, in the shape of an adapter that actually goes into the game card slot, allowing you to expand the memory easily and cheaply. Either way, when it comes to hacking, both of these consoles are perfect for the gamer who doesn't mind or prefers to modify their system at a firmware level. I mean, Jesus, thanks to modders, these consoles have essentially faked their deaths and are living in retirement under new names. They are truly living the dream. But yeah, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. Despite the fake out, this is still a versus video, and I do want to crown a winner. And in that regard, the winner here is the Vita, because it's also a full-fledged PSP. Let me explain. As touched on before, thanks to the Vita's designers, it has perfect backwards compatibility with the PSP. Now, I don't mean you can stick a UMD into the Vita. No, what I'm talking about is if you ever bought a digital PSP game for the Vita, you will notice the game will run just like it did on original hardware. And that's because the original PSP software code is embedded in the Vita itself, and thanks to modders, they made it completely accessible to anyone, easily turning a Vita into a full-fledged PSP, UI and everything. Every strength that made the PSP amazing is now at the fingertips of any Vita owner if they were so inclined. For just that fact alone, the winner here is easily the Vita, because it's an amalgamation of both consoles. It's the best of both worlds, literally. So yeah, point goes to the Vita, which makes the overall winner the PlayStation Vita. Well, that's the video. And yeah, that whole issue I had in the beginning, I still have a problem now. I still have my PSP. This is going to stay home just fine. I mean, I can enjoy that. But yeah, now I have my hacked Vita and my normal Vita. So, which one do I take? So, my issue's still there, but regardless, if you're going to buy one of these, honestly get whichever one you can get your hands on, because hacking the PSP or the Vita is simple as hell, it's easy to do, and just, it's worth it. I mean, when Sony has pretty much said, oh no, we're not going to support these anymore, it's over. I mean, and I get it. It's not really fair for us to expect them to keep going. I mean, it costs money. The servers are going to just keep staying. Like, it costs money. And not many people are buying games anymore that way. So I get it. Eventually they have to go bye-bye. But if they're not going to support it anymore, that's just leaving it wide open for modders and hackers just to open it back up for the rest of us to enjoy it no matter which way. I mean, seriously. Both these consoles are phenomenal, and while the Vita is still technically alive at the time of this video, if you're watching in the future and it's probably already dead, at least the store is dead, that sucks, but don't worry. It's still alive. You just gotta look for it. Because technically, and I can't believe I'm gonna use this stupid cheesy line, because everyone else has done it already, but yeah. Vita means life. And as long as we have something to say about it, it's going to keep having that. So yeah, with that out of the way, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.